Hello there, everyone, and congratulations on your purchase of the Nautilus Drydocks 212 model kit in 1/72nd scale. This video is going to show you how to put this thing together from start to finish with every step along the way. We are going to get started with the foundational aspect of the cylinder, and that is the watertight compartment. Let's get started. All right, the first thing that we are going to want to do is actually make our polycarbonate tube. And in order to do that, we need to put these tube adapters on. What we're going to do here, I'm going to get Jason, we're going to put a thin bead of silicone around the inside of each of the tube adapters. Okay, we want to talk about our tube adapter rings right now. When you get these, they are going to be a little bit coarse on the outside, and that is not good for a seal interface. So the solution to that is coarse and fine sandpaper. That's, I think, 120 and 220 grit sandpaper that we have here. Look at that, good guess. And all you're going to do is put that down flat, and you're going to just make circles. And you're going to continue that until you can see that the outside surface has been marred up. It's going to change color a little bit where it's been sanded. And then once that's done, you're going to switch to this fine grit sandpaper, and you're going to do the exact same thing. When you look at it, when you touch it, when you feel it, it should be very, very smooth. This is going to be important later on to make sure that you don't get any leaks in your cylinder. Now, while he does that, I just want to make a note here. When you get this polycarbonate tube, you should see that the outer edge around the perimeter here has been beveled. Now, if for whatever reason we forgot to do that, it's certainly not a big deal. You can use a file or rotary tool or a piece of sandpaper, but you want to kind of chamfer that so that it's angled, and it'll make getting these tubes on a lot easier. The procedure for doing so, you're going to put this down flat on a hard surface and press and twist. Now you'll see there's a little bit of extra goop in there. Not a problem. Don't mess with it. You're just going to make a big mess. We're just going to leave it and we're going to let it dry, and we'll just trim it off afterwards with our hobby knife. It's important to twist it and make sure it's fully seated on the tube so that you have a perfect 90-degree corner. Now we're going to move to the forward bulkhead. This one really gets nothing on it, for lack of a better term, except we need to cap off this hole, which is typically reserved for the motor. Because there's no motor, we're going to use these little caps that we supply. These are 3D printed in resin, and what you want to do is put a thin bead of medium CA around the perimeter of the hole. You do not need a lot, just enough to create a continuous bead. Drop the adapter in, make sure that everything, you can see right through it because it's clear. That you see that the bead is all the way around. And with that done, we're just going to hit it with a bit of accelerator. You don't need to use accelerator, but it kind of makes things a little quicker in the end. So with the motor bulkhead done, now we need to cap off the two servo outputs. Same deal with those. Now all of the exits to the forward bulkhead have been blocked off. Okay, the next step, we are going to be making linkage rods, and these obviously are going to be coming out and controlling the various functions of the boat in the stern there, the rudders and the diplanes, which in this case are all the same thing. But we need to do something to these to attach them to the servos, and in order to do that, you're going to use these pieces of 1/8 brass tube, which have been cut to 150 millimeters in overall length. And what we're going to do is we're going to use either thick CA or a gel CA. I really like this stuff, by the way, Gorilla Gel. It's really good. So we're going to squeeze some. We're going to put the tip right on the back of the tube, squeeze it in, wipe off the excess a little bit here, and then we're going to take some pliers and go back about 1/4 inch. We're going to grab that, we're going to squeeze it completely flat. Hit it with just a little bit so we don't make a mess. Now we've got a little flat on the end of the rod, and that's going to make what we do next a lot easier. So, and do the same thing to the other side. That done. Now what we need to do is drill a 5/64 hole. Now it'll be 1/16 rod that goes in there, but making it a little bit easier to make it a little bit oversized so that you can thread those little clips through. So we're going to get something to drill on, and then we're going to drill that 5/64 hole in the middle of that area on both linkage rods. The next step is the installation of the linkage seals. Now, these little units are going to come to you pre-made, which is pretty awesome. You're going to see two ends. One's going to have an Oil-Lite bushing sticking out the side, and then the other one's going to have two little marks on it. The side that's protruding goes to the outside of your watertight cylinder. There's a cup seal inside, and it's directional, so it seals against water ingress coming this way. So the Oil-Lite goes to the outside. You're going to insert these into the bulkhead, and it's a snug fit. If you need to, it's a 9/32 drill bit. You can open it up a little bit, but they're press fit. We're going to do that for both of these linkage outputs. So these are now press fit inside, and they've got almost exactly 1/2 inch protruding there. The big thing, I just want to make sure I got a little lip on the inside there, because we're going to run a bead of thin cyanoacrylate around it. And the reason we use thin is that it'll flow around the perimeter of those seals and fuse it to the bulkhead. And by gluing it on the inside, we don't make a mess on the outside, and it looks nice and pretty. Now that that is done, we're going to take our linkage rods and we are going to pop them through. And we want to make sure that these move nice and freely. If they're a little tight, you can take a 1/8 inch drill bit, run it through the inside, just back and forth, give it a little wiggle, and that'll sometimes free up the seal for you. We're going to push those all the way through until they're sitting just about here. Now it is time to install our servos, and they are going to be mounted in such a manner that the wires come out the back of the bulkhead here, and they get press fit in. You can see these little pockets. The little arms go into there. And before we do that, we need to grab our hobby knife, and we're just going to shave off this little triangle, this little support bracket. There we go. So now it's going to fit nice and easily into that pocket. The other thing that you need to do to these servos before you put them into place, so we've got the forward one that we shaved the bracket off of. Now we're going to take the other side, the side closest to the horn there. We're just going to take some side cutters, and we're going to trim off that little mounting flange until it's flush. So we trimmed it, and then we can just take a knife, shave it down so that it's nice and flush and smooth with the rest of the servo body. That done, drop it in place. And the next piece that you're going to need is this servo mounting bracket, this motor bracket, and we're going to get onto mounting the motor to it momentarily. Now we are moving on to the installation of the motor, and we're going to pop out this little brushless motor here and take that bracket and all those little extra bits and pieces out. Really all you need are these bolts. We're going to drop those down there, and I believe those are number 2. Is it number 2 or number 1? Number 2 Phillips head. And you're going to mount it to this. Now the hump goes down.
I want to try to get the wires down to keep them out of the way when you're mounting it in the tube. But I have to take a chamfer this out a bit.
So yeah, what you want to do here, because there's a little C-clip in here, you just need to bevel this out. And you can do that with your sharp hobby knife, or if you've got one, a countersink bit in your drill, or just a big drill bit. And we're just going to drill that down and just open it up a little bit so that little C-clip, when it spins around, doesn't hit the bracket. All right, we are now bolted in. That's tightened down. Everything is free spinning. The next thing you're going to want to do, and this is just my own personal preference, peel these stickers off. They don't stick very well. And when that thing gets spinning super fast, you don't want that. It makes a loud noise. It's safe, but it makes a loud noise. So there you go. Nice and clean. Free spinning, nothing binding, etc., etc. Now what we want to do is put a groove, a little bevel in the top of the shaft, and that's going to be for the shaft coupler to mate to, so the set screw hits a flat. And we're going to use the grinding disc, and we're going to and that's what you want to end up with. Just something like a flat that set screw is going to rest in, so that it doesn't come decoupled, because this thing has a pretty tremendous amount of torque. When you get this coupler, there's going to be a blue mark on one side, and that's the 5mm side, which is the diameter of this shaft. We're going to pop it on there just like this, and then torque it down. We got 4 set screws. The one is the important one on the flat side, and then we're going to go ahead and put the other one on the other side. So that's on. You just check it, make sure it's spinning nice and smooth, it's not wobbly or anything like that. Now we are at the point where we are going to put the seal in our bulkhead. So I'm going to make a note about the next step. So we've installed this coupler on here. What you're going to be getting in your kit is this servo mounting bracket on the back. Now, this needs to go through, so you could do one of two things. You can put this on before the coupler, or what I prefer to do and what we are going to do is drill it out large enough to fit over that coupler so that you can remove the motor without having to undo the servo bracket. So I'm going to drill that out big enough so that it'll slip over that coupler. Next step, we're going to grab our bulkhead, and we've got our 3/16" seal, and that's going to go in the hole here. Now you'll notice that your hole is going to be like a little sloppy. It's not the same as those servo outputs, and we do that on purpose so that the alignment of the seal gets perfectly in line with the shaft once we bolt it in. So for now, I'm just gonna keep this loose. Correction. So what we are going to do, we got our servo bulkhead is right here. We're going to slip in our motor bulkhead right here. And actually, I put that in wrong. Make sure that when you put this in, these angles line up. That circle goes down. And the motor goes down. And then you're going to take these stainless steel studs, and you're going to screw on the little acorns on the end for both, and then use I believe that is 7/32 socket, and that is what the easiest thing is to tighten down those studs. And it does the same thing by torquing that acorn nut on as well. Just a note about these bulkheads here, because of the way that they're manufactured with sintered nylon powder, sometimes the powder gets stuck inside these little passages. So you just need to, use a rod or get a drill bit and just kind of push through it, drill it out, and the powder will come out. Just blow it, clean them out, and then you'll be able to put those studs through no problem. So we use this socket for that, and you can just put that socket, if you've got a big enough drill, in the drill. But if not, you can actually just chuck up the acorn directly into the chuck of your drill. and zing it in just like a screw. And you just maybe want it by hand. You might want to just torque it down to make sure it's fully seated. There you go, nice and solid. Servos are locked in place. Motor spinning nice and freely. Now we are going to move on to our servo horns. You are going to require a servo tester for this next step. If you don't have one, I highly recommend that you get one. There's tons of different versions out there. This is just one that we use here in the shop. The reason that we need this is because we want to make sure that our servos are centered before we go to all the trouble of putting the horns on. So you can see it moving there. This particular tester, I can just push a button and it centers. So we're going to do that for both of the servos. And then what we want to do is take these horns and we're going to snip off one of the arms. We only need one arm. So these horns are too long to fit in here without a little bit of trimming. So you only want the second hole. So you're going to trim it just past the second hole. And then once you do that, you can sand it, make it nice and smooth. And then in that second hole, you're going to take that same 5/64 drill bit and you're going to open that up. Installation is pretty easy. We're going to take our little intermediate shafts, and these are the little U-shaped 1/16 rod. They should be pre-bent, ready to go. I'm going to feed it through the top of that servo horn. All right. Hook it through the linkage rod. Center the servo horn in the middle of that arc and then press it down on the servo just like that. We're going to do the same thing for the other side, but before we do, we're going to test this and we're just going to make sure that it swings nice and easy. We're going to grab our servo tester. Got full arc, no binding. Nothing. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other side and then bolt them down with the supplied bolts. All right, time to do a little bit of electronics work. Now this is likely the kind of electronic speed controller you get, but we do reserve the right to swap this out if we find better ones or ones that'll work in a different way. Regardless, this one is a brushless electronic speed controller. You can tell it's brushless because it's got 3 outputs and our motor has 3 outputs. Traditional brushed ESC will only have 2 wires, as will the motor. This ESC has a built-in 3 amp battery eliminator circuit, which is basically means that's going to get power to the receiver via the electronic speed controller. That saves a separate BEC unit in these deals. Make it a little easier for you guys. We need to connect this to the motor. We want to have about 3 inches of room between the back edge of the speed controller and the back edge of the motor. And all we're going to do is just hold all these wires. We're going to cut all of them right in the middle there. I'm going to go through all of them. And now we're going to strip back these wires and these wires about 1/4 of an inch or so. Now that these are stripped, these are all kind of frayed, we're just going to twist these tight on both sides, both for the motor and for the electronic speed controller. And we've provided these handy dandy heat shrink soldering couplers. All right, and these are so easy to use, they're like miraculous. We're going to start in the middle. Black is always the middle wire for a motor. So we're going to take the middle wire of our speed controller and we're going to hook our connector in the middle, making sure that the 2 wires overlap each other underneath that silver solder area. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to connect the other wires the same way. And it doesn't matter if the red is on the left or the yellow is on the right. It doesn't make any difference. All that means is down the road, you just got to reverse your channel 3 in the transmitter. So get these all pushed together so they're sitting properly, the proper distance. Now we're going to take a little torch. Now you can use a heat gun. These little micro torches are, I think they're like $10 on Amazon. We use them all the time. But they got like a nice tight little flame that comes out the back, and we're going to heat this up until that center point liquefies, and you'll be able to watch it right through that clear heat shrink. So these connections are actually waterproof, by the way. The blue areas on the outside melt and create a waterproof seal around the connection. So you can see that center point is all liquefied. The end points are all liquefied. This is hot. We're just going to let her cool down. So now that we got everything connected, it's time to see how good of a job you did. This is the battery that you'll probably end up with. It's a 2S lithium polymer battery pack. What you're going to want to do is plug in your electronic speed controller to your servo tester. And then we are going to plug in our battery. I'm just going to use these wire leads. We're going to tuck them into the connector so that the electronic speed controller gets power. So we got power going to the speed controller, got our servo tester hooked up. This is free, it's not going to bind on anything, so we're just going to test it in both directions. Nice and smooth. And we're good. I'm satisfied. Now it's time to get the orientation of our seal and get that in place. So this is the prop assembly that you are going to end up with. It has been Loctited to the stainless steel shaft, and there is a set screw in there that also doubles down to make sure it doesn't slip on you. Just like before, the oil light goes to the outside. Should feel loose. We're going to slip this in to our coupler and then push our seal in until on the inside there's about 1/4 of an inch sticking out, and then we are going to glue that seal into place using that CA glue, and that'll lock it into position in perfect alignment with the motor. Once that's cured, once that's all kicked off and is not going to move, we can simply slip this out, and now our motor bulkhead is pretty well complete. Hopefully your silicone is cured by now. We're going to be trimming it out. Just use a sharp hobby knife, put it in on the edge, and just run it along the perimeter there. You'll end up with a long silicone worm. And once you get that cut out, just run your hand on the inside. Make sure there's no residue on the inside. And if there is, just wipe it off with your finger. And then do that for both sides, and our tube will be ready for the next step. Okay, let's make some studs. Jason's going to do this because he's really, really good at it. You got these pre-cut lengths of M3 threaded stainless rod. You're going to screw these little brass standoffs onto the rod. You're going to leave maybe like 1/4 of an inch sticking out, and then you're going to screw on the acorn nut. And you're going to bottom it right out, all the way to the bottom. And that done, you're going to back the stud back up until it's seated on there and the faces line up with each other. Now you need to clean out the hole. So there's a flat side. Just take your hobby knife and just zing it around in there and open it up. It's just an artifact of the 3D printing process. You just want to open it up to the point where it will go over that threaded rod. So you put it on so the cup side is facing that. Slip it up over the assembly that you just made. You're going to use some medium CA and put a nice bead all the way around the outside. And push it up, give it a little twist if those faces aren't perfectly aligned. all the way up. There should be just a little tiny dome of the acorn nut sticking out when you're done. Wipe it, hit it with some accelerator, and you're done. Now, back that off and do it again 5 more times. All right, now these studs are going to have one of each of these secured permanently to one end. So what you're going to want to do is break out your either Loctite, which we tend to end up using, or you can use cyanoacrylate if you don't have any handy. And we're going to just start threading it, put a little drip of Loctite on there. And you want to make sure you thread that all the way up to bottom it out in the top of that acorn nut. Do that once for each rod. What we're going to want to do now is use our new studs. We're going to put them in the bottom 2 holes of the bulkhead. Now these are going to be permanently affixed to this bulkhead because this rear section is going to be all enclosed in the back of the submarine. Is going to be really awkward to get to. So what we're going to do, I'm going to put those in. We're going to take the equipment tray that you got, this 3D printed equipment tray, thread it onto here, and then we're going to, making sure that these are aligned with each other, we can actually even put this through the other side, the other end cap here. And then we're going to glue these permanently to this bulkhead using the gel CA or the medium CA. We're going to apply it all around the base, push it down, hit it with the accelerator, or let it cure fully. Once that's done, we're also going to glue it on the inside here to ensure that this does not come out. So you've put one tray on already. You're going to get 2. Now this is going to look a little different. The one that you're going to get, they'll be equal sized, but they add up to the same thing. Should be about 200 millimeters in overall length. We're going to put this on, and then we're just going to glue these together to make one solid tray. All right, what you see before you here is the general placement of all of the components that go inside. Now, is it critical that you put them precisely the way that I have it? No. It may slightly affect the trimming of the boat a little bit later on, but not to any great degree whatsoever. Components: electronic speed controller, a power distribution hub. You got your receiver that you're going to need to source and install. In this particular case, this is an older receiver that was sold with the VEX radios. You got your V-tail mixer and your electronic speed controller. You can use either 2-sided tape or like RTV silicone to adhere each one of these components to the equipment tray. Once that's all done, the easiest thing actually, before you go too far, get your spacing here, cut these wires for the electronic speed controller, and attach it to this power hub right away, and then place the 2 things. Then you get the perfectly aligned little wire, and we'll show that to you in a minute. All right, let's review where we are at here. We got the different components mounted to the tray here right now. The receiver, the power block, the pitch controller, the X-Tile mixer, and the electronic speed controller. Wires, connection. So channel 1 of your receiver is typically your rudder, and that is going to go from the channel 1, and that's what you're going to plug into the V-tail mixer, the 3-wire lead from the X-tail mixer. 2 is going to plug into the pitch controller, and 3 is going to plug into the electronic speed controller. That's your throttle. So 1 and 2 are your rudders. 3 is your throttle, your electronic speed controller. From the pitch controller, that's what you're going to plug the yellow wire into the signal lead, which is the furthest on the outside there, okay? On the other side, the top output goes into the starboard, the right side servo, and the bottom one goes into the port side, the left servo, okay? Try and get your wires set up properly, otherwise you'll end up having pitch control on your vertical axis, and it'll be all kinds of messed up. So you need to make sure that you have the wires plugged into the correct ports. The two power leads from the electronic speed controller go into the two outside ports of the power distribution block. Now we need to figure out how to turn this this whole thing on. This is the electronic switch. This is a little different than the heavy-duty electronic switch that I offer, because this boat is 7.4 volts. It's a 2S LiPo, so this uses a smaller switch that's rated from 6 to 12 volts. So we just want to pop the bottom off this case so that we can get to the electronics. So once you get the top off, and it does take a little bit of prying, this is the module that we have to work with. Now that we have it out, we've got our ports on the front. We're going to connect some little jumper wires in here and get this thing rigged up and ready to go. For the switch, now this wiring diagram is on my website under the product page for these micro receivers, but you can see it here in this video. So we're going to hold our receiver, our remote switch like so, and we'll see how we need to connect the wires here. There's a few little jumpers that we need to make, and that just means, that's just a fancy name for wire. All right, this is what we have to work with. So, moving from left to right. Port number 1 is not used. 2 has a little jumper that goes to 3. 3 is your negative out to your boat. 2 is negative in, coming from your battery, and that also has the second part of the jumper. And then 1 is shared, and that's positive out to your model and positive in from your battery. Doesn't matter which, they both go to a common port. Now what we want to do is test and make sure that we hooked everything up correctly. So we're going to take one of the leads from port 5 and then the black lead from port 2, and we're just going to connect that to our battery. We can just hold that there. We should see a little green light on the unit. Now, take our remote, and if you hit the lock button, you should hear a click coming from the unit, and that tells you that the relay is engaging. I am now going to flip the cylinder over. We're going to take our switch and put a little bit of two-sided tape on the back. You can use hot glue or silicone, and I'm just going to secure that right in the middle on the leading edge there. Now what we want to do is take our 2 leads, and we are going to put the connector for the battery on there, and you're going to get this, and you're going to get 2 little brass clips. Now we're going to do just a little bit of soldering. These are great if you are going to be working at all with solder. Allows you to clip stuff in like that and hold it without having to hold it with your hands. I also highly recommend this Weller butane soldering torch. It's 75 watts, got a ton of power. So there's no wires or cables, heats up exceptionally quickly. Really like these. You can use a standard electric one too, that's not a big deal. But we're gonna cut these wires short. We're gonna make them about 2 inches long, and then we're gonna solder them to these little brass pins on the end closest to the tabs right there. All right, we've got our little tabs and we've got our clip here. Now, if you'll notice, there is, on the tip here, there's like a little dimple that comes out. And on the front here, you want the dimple, or the rounded part, not the pocket, but the rounded part that sticks out, to go down into this channel on there. So just to reiterate for you guys, that dimple, the pocket is facing up. I'm going to press it into the pocket all the way forward, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You'll also note on the top of the little plastic clip there's a plus and a negative, so you know which one goes in which side. So red to red and black to black. Push that all the way in until it locks, and then do the same thing with the other side. All right, we have the connections made. One final check. We're gonna hook this up. Green light comes on. Check with the remote. Click, click. Excellent. Disconnect the battery. We're gonna set that aside, and now we need to wrap the other two wires around the switch, around the back, and it's going to go into our power distribution block, just like this. So we want to cut our wires just so they slip in there, strip them back, and connect them to the block. Now would be a super awesome time to check everything and make sure it works. So I got my radio, I got it turned on, I plugged power in. Just going to hold this kind of level and push the button and hope it works. All right, seems to be. So let's test the functions here. We'll move our rudder and our pitch control, throttle. That's it. It's working well. Now we're here. Since we're here, let's grab the electronic pitch controller, and we're gonna turn down the sensitivity. You can see this is like jumping all over the place, right? We don't want that, so we're gonna press and hold for the set button for about 2 seconds and then release. So now that switched sensitivity setting 2, you'll notice they're behaving a lot better. They're not jittering around. The other thing we can do is ensure this is perfectly level and that we've got a green light. If not, if you press and hold the set button quickly, that'll zero out your pitch and you'll be in good shape from there. Now, the 82 has the instructions on my website. You can download if you want to program this a little bit further or learn more about it. But that's it. We've checked it. It's working. Turn it off. Turn off the radio. Now we can worry about our battery. And there's a few things you could do. You could, what I would recommend, use two-sided Velcro tape so that you can pull the battery out. And then we're going to put it just like this with that lead going back so it's easy and convenient to make that connection up. Just check our spacing, and that's where it's going to sit. The end is near. One of the last things that we need to do here is drill for our receiver antenna / test hose. So we got this rubber silicone hose that you're going to get in this little piece, 1-inch piece of 1/8 brass tubing. There's a little dimple in the front of the cylinder. We're going to drill in. We're going to need to go at a little bit of an angle to avoid these output shafts. Drill in all the way through. And we're going to take our brass tube and twist that in, push it all the way in until about 1/4 inch sticks out. All right, with the nipple in there, we're going to use a little bit of thin CA and wick it around the base. I'm going to do it from the inside here just because it's going to look a little better. And that's going to lock that piece of brass tube in place. Now we're going to take our receiver antenna. we're going to go ahead and thread that into that piece of brass tubing. And it's going to come all the way to the outside there. Now we want to make sure that our receiver antenna stays away from anything that's moving, and more so just is nice and neat and tidy. So you're going to be given these little wire clips with two-sided tape on it, and you're just going to stick that to the side of the equipment tray there. And then you can feed that wire through those clips, and that'll keep it nice and tidy. And we're going to put another one up in here. It's going to keep it away from the motor and from the servos. Now that we have our receiver antenna inside there, I'm going to take a little bit of oil, and you can use WD-40 or like silicone garage door lubricant. I just happen to have this silicone 3-in-1 oil. I'm going to put a drip inside this tube, because what we want to do now is feed this receiver antenna through the tube as far as we can until we get to the very end. Now here's a little hint. If it gets hard, it looks like I'll be able to do it, but if it does get hard to do, what you can do, pinch the receiver antenna in your finger and then stretch the hose out, grab it back here, and then let go of the front. Pinch here, let go, stretch it, and let go of the front. And what that'll do, you see, it helps push it down to the back. And once you get it all the way there, slip that hose over the brass tube all the way. We've got our receiver antenna in here. The purpose behind this is so that you can stretch this antenna out as long as you can in the model to increase the range of your reception. And then also, once this is all buttoned up, you can blow in this tube and test for leaks. You can look for bubbles that come out. So what we need to do before we forget, we need to cap this off, because that's obviously a full channel for water to get directly into your watertight cylinder. So you just got this little piece of 3/32 brass rod. You're going to press that into the end, and now you've capped off your tube. Now what we want to do is tidy up all of our connections. You can see these are like hanging out. They're big and like not cool. So if you need to, you can like unplug these and reroute them. Do what you need to do to make these cables as tidy as possible, keeping them away from your motor. And you've supplied these zip ties, and you'll be able to keep everything nice and tidy and bundled together. All right, this is where I put the zip ties. I put just one here that's holding everything nice and tidy, and then two down here to keep the servo cables away from the motor. Now what we're going to do is grab our seals. You can slip these over the back and around the bulkhead, keeping it tight up against the flange there. And then we have our forward seal. Now, just at this point, a note. This finish is just ever so slightly grainy. Typically, these O-rings are soft enough that that's not an issue between the interface here to create a nice seal. If you find you do have bubbles that come up between here, what you can do is take the seal off and use a little bit of clear nail polish and put it on that flange, and that'll make a gloss finish and a better interface for the seal. Now that that's all done, we can grab our cylinder tube, slide that on just like that, put the other side on, and now we need to put our last stud in here all the way through into the hole in the back and glue it to that rear bulkhead. With that stud glued down solidly in place, we're going to take our O-ring seals here. We're going to slip them over these studs, take our knurled nuts, put them on, thread them down all 3 times. So now we have a sealed, watertight cylinder for our electronics, except we have a hole. That's where that shaft goes for the main drive motor. So we're just going to slip in the drive shaft. It doesn't need to go all the way, just enough to engage the seal. Now we should have a completely sealed watertight chamber. Let's just do a preliminary test. We can just uncap the end of this tube and you should be able to blow into it and it should kind of hold pressure. Once you've tested it, take it to your bathtub, dunk the whole thing, blow into the tube, look for leaks. If you have tested your cylinder and you've got no leaks whatsoever, congratulations. You got probably the hardest part of the build out of the way. It's time to move on to the hull.